Christina Parker, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm happy to have you for sure. So just to go through your bio here a little bit, so everybody is familiar. So you're from born and raised in Victoria, British Columbia.
I'm actually from a small town outside of Toronto, but I've spent the last 10 years on the West Coast, so I feel like I'd like to say that I'm from there now.
Gotcha. And in case anybody's not aware of that, British Columbia is the westernmost province in Canada.
Yeah.
But you're currently living in Edinburgh, Scotland, in the UK. You're getting your master's in nationalism studies at the University of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And you're involved, you were involved, when you lived in Canada, you were pretty involved with the Canadian Stuttering Association. You're involved with their newsletter.
Yeah. So I kind of organized and wrote most of that for, I guess, just over a year-ish or so.
All right. Do you know Lisa Wilder?
Yeah.
In Canada? Cool.
Yeah, I do.
She's a friend of mine. And now that you're over in Scotland, you're involved with the Scottish Stammering Network, with their podcast in particular, and then running their Facebook page as well.
Yeah, so I've kind of somehow wiggled my way into the podcast. I think I joined once just as a guest, and then now, I help run the Facebook page. And the podcast is called Oh, and On That Note, where basically we just talk about anything that we really want to talk about using the catchphrase "Oh, and on that note." Some guests stammer or stutter, some don't. Sometimes we talk about stuttering, sometimes we don't. It's more just to kind of get the sound of people stammering in media and out there, and kind of make it just sound normal, because it is. So yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah, that's kind of the premise, or that's one of the ideas of my podcast also. So I'm not just, a lot of times in the media, the only time you hear about stuttering or stammering is, oh, look, this person overcame their stammer, and I mean, that's fine if they want to highlight some of those examples too, of course, but you don't see too many examples of people that are still stuttering. But one of the things I'm focusing on is to show that you don't have to, quote, overcome or get rid of your stutter or stammer to still do very impressive things in life. And it's not determinative of really anything other than the fact that it's slows us down a little bit when we talk. But yeah, so that's the idea.
Absolutely. And it's just something that's there, and it is what it is. And I think that if you want to do therapy, which I have done, to help find ways to either understand it a bit better or cope or change it or whatever, that's totally fine. But I think that, as you said, the first step is just accepting that it just is what it is. And however you want to manage or address it or think about it is fine, but it's just a part of who you are. In the same way I have curly hair or dark hair, or if you're tall or short, it's just something that you have. So I think that looking at it as just a part of who you are, not the entirety of what describes you, I think it's just really helpful. I've tried to always picture I'm just someone that happens to stutter, the same way I happen to love running. It's not the entirety of me.
Well, and was that a perspective that you just sort of naturally found when you were a young child, or did it take a while to get that mentality?
It took a long time. I think it's definitely taken a lot of personal reflection and time to kind of get to that point where I think like this. I definitely didn't at all. I kind of felt like I let it consume me. and kind of take up my entire personality, which is obviously not, like, I have more to offer than just that. And I think kind of moving it to a category, to just a part of who I am, I think really helped me kind of have this perspective. I think, and once you have it, you kind of run with it. You kind of get more and more and more and more confident. But yeah, the first bit is always a bit tough to kind of change from, yeah, viewing it as that's all I am. I'm just a person that stutters, to everyone has things or disabilities or weird things about them that just make them who they are. Ours just happens to sound like this, but everyone has them if you know it or not. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, I had a very, well, my childhood surrounding my stutter, at least once I became self-conscious of it, right? Like, really, my childhood happened in two stages. For me, up until I was at least 9 or 10, I don't remember even being aware that I had a stutter, although from what my parents tell me, from the time I started talking when I was 3 or whatever, I would kind of bounce on whoa words and talk like that, but I wasn't self-conscious of it. I didn't care, and therefore I was happy. But once I started getting made fun of when I was maybe 9 or 10, and it wasn't, looking back, 99% of the kids were not making fun of me, but there were a few that were, and those are the ones that really got my attention. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but from what I understand, like evolutionarily, we are kind of programmed to notice the threats, the negative, if you will, because that's something I've asked myself, like, why do just so many people in general in the world choose to focus on the negative so much, right? Like, they got all these great things about their life, right? But there's one or two, and people, including myself in that second stage of childhood, really latch on to that thing that's not perfect. Why is that? But if you think about it, back 5,000, 50,000 years ago, all of our ancestors essentially, until relatively recently, there were serious threats, right, in the world. I mean, life was, I forget the philosopher that said that, but life was, short, brutish and brutal, or whatever that phrase was.
Yeah.
Right, and those people that were nice, that were cool, in your village or in the neighboring village, were not a threat. So you didn't have to notice them as much because they weren't a threat. But that one person, or whoever was a threat, we had to really pay attention to that and remember them, because they might, kill us, or, kill our kid or whatever, or, wild animals or whatever the case may be. We had to be attuned to threats, which makes sense. But that nature, right, is still in us. I mean, we are genetically, from what I understand, pretty much identical to our ancestors, 10,000 years ago almost. And so that's our, what do they call that? Our animal brain or our primal brain or whatever it is. So it's natural, right? It's natural to really latch on as a kid when other kids start making fun of you about something or you become aware of it. It's very normal to latch on and obsess. And in my case, I started trying really not to stutter, really putting pressure on myself. I will just talk normally, don't give these kids any ammunition to make fun of you. And once I started trying not to stutter, well, then it really became a big problem, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think as a kid, I think where I started to kind of be that self-conscious bit, kind of what you're talking about, was mostly when I realized that no one else sounded the way that I sounded. And I think that is when it comes down to, why am I different? Because there's obviously something different about me. And I think that's where, for me, I thought, well, if everyone else doesn't sound like this and I do, what does that mean for me? Does that mean that I can't do what they're doing, or I'm not going to end up where they end up, or I'm not going to have the friends that they have? And I think that just being able to accept the fact that everyone is different. No one's the same. But as a kid, you kind of hear your friends talk and hear you talk, and you're right, you kind of latch on to the fact that no one else sounds the way that I do. And I think that for a long time, even into my teens and young adult years, I on purpose didn't speak to anyone else that sounded the way that I sounded, because it made me so self-conscious, because because I didn't have that exposure until so late in my life. When I heard someone else stutter, I would almost be embarrassed for them, because it was me looking at a mirror of my own self, and I wasn't able to, I think, accept that I had one. So having to listen to someone else have one was just the worst thing ever. So I didn't ever like be a part of any kind of like stuttering community or podcasts or talking or conferences. Like I did nothing, because I think I didn't accept it. So why would I want to go hear someone else that sounds as dumb as I sound? And that was the headspace that I had for such a long time. So to think about kind of where that was to now, where I love being around others that sound the way that I sound. And even then, we all don't sound the same, because we all have our own way of stuttering, if it's blocks or if it's repetition of sounds or words. But for me, that's a true testament of how far I've come, to the fact that when I have an opportunity to go to the pub with some of my friends from the Scottish Stammering Network or do podcasts and things, I always jump on it. Because why not hear the kind of life stories of other people, and you kind of get to joke and talk, because you're like, hey, when I asked for directions on the bus, the person didn't know where, or thought I didn't know where I was going, or people ask me what my name is because they think I don't know, or those kind of dumb things that happen. You don't ever get to really realize that everyone goes through these same things. And then you can kind of joke about certain things, like, yeah, of course I forgot my name because I don't know it. I'm an adult, I have a job, I'm getting a master's, but no, I totally forgot what my name was. I have not heard that one before. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because something that fascinates me that on the subject of what you were talking about is, it seems like wherever you are, whether it's in the US or Canada or Scotland or England, when you look at the numbers, right, because it's supposed to be 1% of adults, or maybe that 1% includes kids too, but 1% of people stutter. But even in the biggest chapters, as we call them in the National Stuttering Association in the US, even the biggest chapters, like I went to one in Midtown Manhattan, which has 35 people or so that are showing up at the monthly meetings. When you look at the actual numbers, for example, there in Greater New York City, I think the numbers is like 80,000 people stutter, but even at a very vibrant chapter, there's still only 30 or 35 people coming to meetings. So 99, I think if you crunch those numbers, 99+% of people that stutter never go to a meeting, never surround themselves with other people that stutter. And I can't tell you how many people, myself included. So I'm 43 now, but the first 41 years of my life, I never went to a meeting with other people that stutter. In my case, and I had a little bit of a different journey after high school. So my freshman year of college, I had somebody that did something really valuable for me, speech therapist, or the guy who ran the speech language pathology department at Florida State, where I went to college, brought me around and made me get used to looking people in the eye when I stuttered. And for me, that really changed things. from a psychological standpoint. So even though I still stuttered, you know, from age 18 to 41 during that stage of my life, um, you know, I still stuttered a lot, but I was confident. You know, I would look people in the eye, I would make jokes, and I promised myself, almost like a point of honor, that I'm never going to run away from any words ever again. If I want to say it, I'm going to say it. And if
You
I
can
stutter,
wait while I talk.
right. Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm sorry I'm inconveniencing you. If I knew how to control this, I would, but I don't. And so my only alternative is to just shut myself up, which is what I did in high school and what I did in late middle school. Just don't talk. Right? That's what I did, but that was miserable. You know, and as you can tell, you know, I like to chat, you know, and so that was totally not me.
Yeah.
And so my perspective was, you know, and I didn't have to say this to people, but they could see it with my eyes, you know, like, you know, well, if you have a problem with my stutter, no worries, go hang out with somebody else. There's, you know, 7 billion fluent people on the planet, go find some of them if that's what you need. You know?
Absolutely.
Um, but, you know, I'm watching you. We're, you know, not I'm watching you, we're just talking, but, you know, any kind of disrespect or any kind of acting like a jerk that you might do, I'm going to see it. And very few people will disrespect you to your face, you know? And most people in my experience, once they realize, oh, you know, this guy didn't forget his name, right? He's finishing, you know, he's making some solid points. He's got a speech impediment of some kind, right? I mean, they're not, you know, most people aren't educated on stuttering in particular.
Exactly.
And insofar as they do know about stuttering, most people, and I think there might be a little bit more awareness of this. My impression is there might be a little bit more awareness of this in Britain than there is in the U.S. Just because, you know, the King's speech was, you know, was set there. I think the British. Well, I'm not sure, but my impression is there's more documentaries. There's more that's done on it in Britain. Is that been your experience relative to?
Yeah. So I'll start with that. I definitely think that like I don't think it's a higher amount of people that have one here because as you said, I think it's a quite common thing everywhere. But I do feel like they have a lot more exposure, and I don't know if it's because the associations are quite big and they do a lot to make sure kind of the word gets out. I was actually in a taxi, I think in October or whatever, and the radio that was on in the taxi, there was a guy talking on some show about stammering. So I thought, what a cool thing! I'm in a taxi in Edinburgh going to class, and the radio host is talking to someone else about having a stammer. So I don't know if it's through just the kind of getting the word out that just seems to be a lot more common or a lot more knowledge or understood, and kind of connecting that back to what you were saying before. I think I kind of made a similar pledge of like if the time is correct, I'm going to say something to that person that's either making a comment or unsure or looks confused. And I know that I can tend to sometimes be on the aggressive end of it. Like sometimes I'm pretty direct with explaining to the person that I'm talking to that they're being super, 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 super disrespectful. And I try to not call people out if we're in a big kind of setting that I think is not appropriate. But I'll very bluntly say, I have a speech impediment or I have a disability. So if you don't mind just being a little patient. And generally, they apologize and they're all of a sudden super, super sorry because a lot of times they just didn't know. And I think that I have to kind of work on not being so aggressive because generally they're not doing it from a mean place. It's just that they they don't know what it is. So I think that the reason why I love being so involved in things like this is I think that um, I personally, I feel like I'm not allowed to be quiet about it, because I think I'm not only doing a disrespect to myself, but for everyone else in the stuttering community who may not be as outgoing as I am, or may not be in the same headspace that I currently am. I feel like those that do feel confident, and that those that do feel empowered need to kind of get the word out. Because even if I tell one person a day what is happening or why I sound the way I sound, that's one more person that understands what it is, and then they'll pass it on. And I think that by understanding the difference between an invisible and a visible disability, like not everyone sees it as a disability, and that's fine. But understanding that there's things, everyone has something. You just can't see it in the same way for others, where ours is very obvious when we talk, but when we don't talk, we look just like everyone else. So sometimes it catches others off guard, I think, or those that don't stutter all the time, and it kind of pops up every other sentence or whatever. I can speak sometimes for a few sentences and sound fine, and then all of a sudden I have a big block like that, and I can't get it out. Or every single sentence I have something, depending on the day or whatever. So I think that sometimes even when I speak more fluently, it almost makes it more complicated, because then I have to almost be like, I know I sounded fine there, but that's a whole other thing that I don't feel like explaining, but this is what I have. And sometimes I sound fine, sometimes I don't. But yeah, I definitely try to always say something. If it's on the phone or just someone walking by that makes a comment or smiles or jokes or whatever. In Canada, when I served, the amount of time that I had a customer ask me if I was cold is bizarre. The amount of times, and I don't know why in their head the sound that I make makes them feel like I'm cold, and I guess they think that my teeth are chattering, or I don't know, or is it Canada and everyone thinks I don't know. But I thought the amount of times I could have said, no, I'm actually not cold, I just have a stutter. The amount of opportunities that I passed up, I think, thinking back now, I go, man, I should have just said something. But I was like, oh no, or like, oh yeah, and kind of just brushed it off, which I wish that I didn't do now. But
Yeah, that's interesting. The being cold. I don't think I've heard that one, but I wonder if, like, I guess I can see maybe they thought you were shivering or something when you were stuttering, right?
I think so, but I'm running around serving. I'm
Right.
sweating. Yes, I'm definitely cold. Like, but yeah.
I hear you. And I,
Anyways.
and I think well, it was something you mentioned is something that I'm big on as well. That we are an advocate, whether we know it or not. Every time we speak up, we're an advocate for anybody that sees us speak up, and therefore encounters, knowingly, they're aware of it, they encounter a person that stutters. We are, when we say what we want to say, when we finish our sentences, we make our solid point, and that in and of itself shows a certain amount of courage to have a speech impediment, an obvious challenging speech impediment, but to be saying it anyway. And people might, most people don't know much about stuttering, but they can recognize courage when they see it, and they can say to themselves, wow, this gal or guy, they got a pretty good stutter going on, but they're just saying what they want to say anyway. That's kind of cool, right? And a lot of people will think, and a lot of fluent people have told me this, Mike, I really respect the fact that you speak up anyway. I might be much more self-conscious, and I might be, right, et cetera, et cetera. And on the one hand, I guess you could take that as some people might be offended by that because they're saying, oh, that must be hard to have that stutter. But in reality, what people are saying is they respect our character, for speaking up. And people, well, first off, those who listen to my podcast have heard me say this before, but 99% of the people, 99% of the losers in the world, however you define loser, are fluent. 99% of the people we would not want to be in the world are fluent.
Yeah.
99% of the least impressive, however you define that, people in the world are fluent. So fluency is not a ticket to, glory, right, or greatness. It's actually not just average, it's super average. 99% of anything that 99% of people can do without a problem is not special.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's not. And so, but yeah, we have a tendency, at least through parts of our life, especially childhood, for the vast majority of us people that stutter, where we thought fluency was super special, and that the only thing standing between us and the us that we wanted to be
100%
was
that one thing.
Was that one thing.
Yep.
Right? And but in reality, other people really don't. It's no different. The conditions are different, but it's no different than I don't see somebody in a wheelchair and think, oh, that person is less of a human being than I am, right? Because I can walk and they're in a wheelchair. It's not their fault they're in a wheelchair, right? And if anything, well, and to me, the classic example of this point is Stephen Hawking.
Mm-hmm.
So in his own right, even if he was able-bodied, is a great physicist, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, early 21st centuries. But we wouldn't have ever heard of him as non-physicists, probably. I don't know that I can name any other physicist other than Einstein, right? Maybe if I thought about it hard, but everybody knows Stephen Hawking. Why? Because he had this, severe disability, much more than anything we have that people that stutter, right? He couldn't, brush his teeth, right? He couldn't take care of basic bathroom activities on his own. He couldn't speak on his own, right? None of that stuff. But he still became a legend of human history. He was like, yes, I'm super disabled, but it's not going to stop me. I'm still going to pursue my dreams. I'm still going to be a badass physicist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's almost an opportunity to become a hero, an opportunity to show our courage and to show our character. And fluent people, most people don't have that regular everyday opportunity to show off their character like we do, right? It takes courage to get on the bus, say we're not sure what stop we're supposed to get off on. It's a busy bus, although I guess not so much now in COVID-19 times, but right, there's lots of people sitting there. We ask the bus driver what stop, and we stutter, and everybody looks at us. It can suck to an incredibly huge extent if that's how we look at it. And that's the natural way that most of us look at it as kids, right? It's embarrassing, there's shame, there's feelings of inferiority, all that stuff. But actually, if we say it, that by anybody's definition, that is a courageous act.
Yeah. And actually, I was talking to some friends, and obviously, if they ask, like, I try to not talk about my stutter a whole bunch if it doesn't kind of come up or whatever. But one day at the pub, it kind of came up, and we were talking and stuff, and I said, yeah, it is something that is difficult every day. If it's ordering something or answering the phone or getting on a bus or whatever. But I go backpacking by myself to places in South America, Europe, like random spots, and then do a whole bunch of traveling. Because I thought, if I have to ask for direction on the bus in my hometown, what's the difference of asking directions on a bus somewhere else? And I had a friend go, wow, I can't believe that, like, you're so adventurous that you'll not only go to those places and travel by yourself, which is adventurous on its own, but the fact that on top of that, sometimes you can't even get the words out, or sometimes I find stutter is a lot worse in a different language. So if I try to learn small things in Spanish or French or wherever I have a very hard time on top of that. So, but I thought, like, what is that? My other option is I just don't go, which just seems so dumb. And I think that even in terms of things like you were saying about like accomplishments, I think I've worked quite hard in my own personal and academic and professional life, that I think that in an article that I wrote for the British Stammering Association, I said that it's my accomplishments now that set me apart, not my stammer. That when someone who doesn't know me hears about me, or someone meets me, it's generally the fact that I'm studying at one of the top 20 universities in the world. That's what sets me apart. Or the fact that I got a job in the government right after I was done my undergrad, and I've wrote legislation and policy development, and have built a pretty good career for how young I am there. It's that sets me apart. And the fact that I moved here by myself, or I backpack the jungle in Colombia on my own. So it's those things that define me, and it just makes it, as you said, extra impressive, the fact that I was able to do all that, and I'm still doing all that, despite the fact that half the time I can't even get out my own name. So yeah, I sometimes go, there's people that have fluency that don't do any of those things. So I think that, as you said, I also kind of picture it as this ticket. If only I was fluent, I could accomplish this. Or if only I was fluent, the things that I would do or where I would go, which is so ridiculous, because you can do all those things anyways. You don't need to have this magical ticket to accomplish any of those things. And I think that I try to wake up every day and kind of remind myself of that. Yeah, I'm doing just fine. Yeah, I have tough days, absolutely, and I still have battles to get through, and I have days where it infuriates me, and like it's not saying it's all sunshine and rainbows, but I go, you know what? Like, I've done a damn good job despite having it. So what's stopping me now? You know?
Right, right. And I think that's the point of not total physical freedom, like you said, because it can still,
Yeah.
be a battle to get through words sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's psychological freedom, which is the important kind, right? As far as just not feeling inferior, I think that's kind of, for me, that was the big thing, is realizing that no, this doesn't make me less of a person at all. And that's not just happy talk, like, oh no, I'm not, let me tell myself that, but not really believe it, right? We have to really believe it. And like, for example, a friend of mine that stutters is an eye surgeon. And we were talking about this, he's still a little bit sensitive sometimes about what his patients think about him. Oh, like, what thoughts are they having, right? Well, how's this guy going to do my eye surgery if he, can't even say his name effectively, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of thoughts. But there's a completely different, and I think more accurate, way to think about that, where people see, wow, this guy's got a pretty significant stutter going on, and yet he became an eye surgeon. He must be a great, eye surgeon, because that must have been hard.
Yeah.
Right. And, what's that?
Or why is talking a necessity for using your hands to do an eye surgery?
And I think that's why, and I asked him when we were talking about that, I was like, so do any of your patients ever like run away when you start stuttering and say, no, you can't do my surgery? He said, no, that doesn't happen, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and I think it also, stuttering can humanize us, where, well, for example, I'm a dentist, and I own 5 practices in upstate New York,
Wow.
and there's probably 28 dentists on board and maybe 220 employees. And I do some exam days where I'll schedule like a lot of patients, and it's low. So my offices are mainly Medicaid offices, which is low income insurance in the U.S. Or folks that are low income, right, have free health insurance, which is Medicaid, and so the patients are all low income folks. So when I go to do an exam, and now the last couple of years I've been in more control over things, but for all those years with the severe stutter, and I can send you my a video that I have, which kind of shows exactly where I was from those years at 18 to 41. But I felt like it made me connect more with patients because the first 2 things they knew about me, one was I was Dr. Wilson, that owned all these offices. And so that is going to make them feel like I'm up here and they're, very low income, right? And sometimes folks that are low income are used to being not treated that well, right? They go to social services, they go to the grocery store and they pull out their food stamps card and they maybe get smirks and,
Yeah.
that sort of thing from people. So sometimes there might be a sensitivity there where they're expecting you to treat them like they're, less than you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so the first 2 things they know is, one, that I'm Dr. Wilson, and 2, this guy's got a pretty significant speech impediment going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it humanized me. It let them know right off the bat, without me having to explain anything, just seeing my stutter, that, this guy's got his challenges also. We're, and rather than, oh, he's got it all, he's got no, that sort of thing. And so I feel like it actually is a point of connection with people where, and I heard, I think it was Chris Constantino, if you've heard of him, he's on the Stutter Talk podcast sometimes. He made this point of, and I've experienced this, as soon as he said it, it resonated with me. That experience of walking, down the hall in school or work, wherever, and you walk by somebody that you don't know, or that and they say hi. Now, the normal, quote unquote, the typical interaction there is you walk past each other, they say, hey, how you doing? You say, hey, how you doing? I'm good. You just keep walking, right?
Yeah.
But when you got a stutter, that might not be so fast. So they say, hi, how you doing? And we say, hi, how you doing, right? And they have to stop walking. Right? I mean, if they keep walking when we're stuttering, well, that's not nice. And most people won't do that once they see that you're trying to say something. And so, you have to stop for a second and they wait for you to say, hi, how you doing? And sometimes, a lot of times, it can lead to a more genuine human connection with people. It's an atypical moment that they don't usually have in that, and that would usually be a pretty much meaningless encounter. Hi, how you doing? Hi, how you doing? I'm good. You just keep walking. It's like a meaningless formality, right?
Yeah.
But when they have to stop and wait for you to finish, like it adds meaning. It adds a human moment where 2 people in a moment together. Yes, it's me stuttering, but it can add a layer of depth.
Totally.
The situation wouldn't be there otherwise.
Yeah, no, and I feel like not always, but I feel like there are sometimes that whenever we're having some kind of like debate or discussion with friends, generally when I speak, I find people listen, partly because they know that it's going to take me a little extra time, or I'm going to have some difficulties, so everyone will just listen to what I'm saying, kind of take a step back from the kind of ongoing debate. There's a whole bunch of us, or the fact that they know that if I'm putting the effort to say something, there must be something that I actually want to say, because
Right.
it's going to take me a lot more effort to say something than it is any of them. So it must have some kind of significance, or importance, or mean enough to me or to the conversation that I'm going to take the time to actually say it. So yeah, I think sometimes it does kind of make the connections a lot more meaningful. Yeah, they'll say she wants to say something, so they'll stop kind of.
Right, right. Not only does it kind of slow them down, right? You know, with the
Yeah.
hustle and bustle, go, go,
A,
go.
a big debate or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, 100. And a lot of times, you know, especially in more spirited conversations, but in general, a lot of times people aren't listening that well to each other, right? People are talking over each other. Well, I think this. Well, I think this. Well, I think
Yeah.
this. Well, I think this. You know, that sort of thing. And it almost becomes almost competitive sometimes. You know, that's not ideal, obviously, not an ideal way to communicate, but a lot of times it happens. And so, but to your point, when we're, and I remember noticing this too, that's a great point. When we're having to battle through our syllables to communicate an idea, people on the other end of that tend to think, man, he must or she must really believe what she's saying here, because, you know, she wouldn't be putting in all this effort just to tell me 10 words.
Exactly. If my hand's going up and I'm putting in the effort to put my hand up and talk in front of everyone,
Right.
y'all better listen to what I have to say.
Right, right. Yeah, and it, you know, and it does. It makes people almost like, I'm not finding the exact analogy, but almost like from the hustle and bustle of like a highway or an expressway where the cars are go, 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 and then suddenly somebody's, you know, somebody starts talking that has a stutter, and it makes everybody kind of stop and pause. And almost like you go from the super hustle and bustle of the highway to like you're sitting beside a peaceful river or something, patiently waiting for, you know, the other person to finish what they're saying, you know?
Yeah.
And in my experience, I found that eye contact for me made people, well, so I think a lot of people, we tend to think that, or, you know, through our history, we tend to think that people, that what people are thinking about our stutter is, oh, why can't this person talk? Or, you know, they must be stupid, or they must lack confidence, or whatever the case may be. And in truth, when we're blocking a lot and we're looking away, especially, I think what's happened a lot of times is people can be uncomfortable sometimes, especially at first, around somebody that stutters. But why is that? I think it's because a lot of times when we're blocking, we tend to look like we're uncomfortable. And then that makes them kind of uncomfortable because they think we're uncomfortable. But I've found that when we can get in that habit of bringing it back and looking them in the eye when we block, eye contact portrays confidence. It just does, right? And it portrays equality. Like, hey, we're just two people here talking, looking each other in the eye. Yeah, I'm the one stuttering, but we're both in this moment here together.
Yeah.
I may be uncomfortable, you know, but you're uncomfortable too.
Yeah.
But eye contact portrays confidence, and so then they don't. That tells them. It tends to tell them in a very primal sort of way, right? I mean, eye contact eye contact does go back. It has to goes back before human language, right?
Mm-hmm.
It you know, I mean, you see it in the animal kingdom. Eye contact means a lot, right? Like, you know, if the bear jumps out of the woods, I forget if you're supposed to look him in the eye or not, but it matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right? I mean, the same with dogs, you know, like a hostile dog, you don't want to look him in the eyes because that means something, you know?
Yeah.
And so in a very primal, deep way, that portrays a certain amount of confidence. You know, like this person, they got this speech impediment, but they seem to be okay with it, and they seem to be confident. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then that makes them more comfortable, which then it's like a virtuous cycle, right? They're more comfortable, so we become more comfortable, right? You know, all human
Just
relationships are a two-way street, right?
Yeah. And I think part of, well, this is my own theory. I think part of the problem as to why, as you're saying, everyone kind of assumes we're either shy or there's another health condition that we have beyond just the way that we sound, is mostly to do with the only exposure that people generally get to someone that sounds like us is on shows and movies, where the person that stammers or stutters in a show or a movie generally either has like another mental health issue or problem, where they have other developmental issues, that are beyond just the way that they sound. And that's just one of a whole bunch. Or the person's super, super nervous. So they stutter because they don't want to talk to a girl or whatever. So those are the only two times that majority of people get to hear it. Then, like, I can't really blame them for thinking that either we're not smart or we're really, really shy or nervous. And I, more than once, I must say, when I watch a movie or a show, or that there's even a song that came out, I actually write the producers and say, you are misrepresenting thousands of people. There's a song, I think it's actually called Stuttering, and it's a quite big song. It made the top charts in the US. And the chorus actually goes, she was saying that she's like nervous or something, and she was stuttering, stuttering, and like that's actually in the song. And I thought, no one would go like wheelchair, rolling, wheelchair. Like no one would do that.
Well, and that's a great point. And I think this is something that I've thought about a lot, right? Because it seems like making fun of stuttering is the last, disability, last problem that you're allowed to make fun of. And
Yeah.
that got me thinking, like why is that? Why would that be? And one thought I had was maybe that's because everybody sometimes stutters.
That's exactly it. Everyone does it.
Right? Like we're not sometimes in a wheelchair or, sometimes blind or sometimes deaf or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? But everybody stutters sometimes. And when fluent people stutter, it means something, right? It means, and another place where you see it in movies and shows and real life, well, I'll just use an example. I've got 4 kids, and my older 2 are my boys who are 9 and 10. So, and none of them, are people that stutter, kids that stutter. But, when they start stuttering, when I ask them, who ate the 10 cookies over here? And they're like, I'm going to speak of the devil. Hey guys, I'm on a podcast call. Not now. All right. That was my 4-year-old saying, can we have watermelon now?
Oh, that's so cute.
Oh, that was perfect timing there,
Yeah, that was great timing. Please.
So, that's one time when fluent people start stuttering, when they're lying, right?
Yeah.
Another time they will start stuttering sometimes is when they're super nervous, right? Or like you said, when there's, mental disabilities there, perhaps. So, and well, therefore, most stuttering in this world is done by the 99% of fluent people. So they think they already know what that means, and they do know what that means when fluent people start stuttering.
Yeah.
And so they confuse our stuttering, at first at least, with the stuttering that everybody else does.
Yeah.
Right? So that makes it challenging And I think that's why that's one reason why disclosures can be very powerful, just to educate. So if somebody asks our name, and I did this, usually I wouldn't have to do it because, I found that eye contact really, that's another thing. It made people figure it out much faster. This guy's still with me. He's still talking, but he's having some difficulty getting his words out. He must have some sort of speech impediment. So why don't I not be a jerk about it and keep asking him to spit out his name or whatever, right? Because once they know we've got a condition, like we said earlier, very few people would be a jerk about it. No more than we would start making fun of the person in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
Right? Most of these people are not bad people. They just don't know what's going on, right? And as I'll quote Nina G. I don't know if you know Nina G, the comedian. So she was my first guest on my first episode of the podcast. And she's got a great phrase. She likes to use her stutter, among other reasons, as an asshole detector, right? And as we pointed out, and we talked about this, I brought up that concept of, and she's got the reframed iceberg, right? The iceberg analogy, right? Where 90% of stuttering is below the surface, and it's the shame, the embarrassment, feelings of inferiority, all that stuff. But she's got a reframed iceberg, which I love, which is on, I need to put that on my Stutter with Confidence Facebook thing that I just started. So the reframed iceberg is things like pride, acceptance, courage, right? So we can reframe our iceberg away from essentially away from a super negative iceberg to a super positive iceberg. And in that conversation with her, I had brought up that concept of forgiveness, that it's important for me, at least. I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's important for me because stuttering, and another thing that can be in the negative iceberg, is anger, right? Like, that jerk just asked me if I forgot my name. That's not cool. I've got to stutter. And of course it's not cool, but once again, people think they know what that means. When they ask somebody their name and they start stuttering, they think it means they're drunk, or they think it means something. And sometimes they just have an immediate reaction, right, before they think it through, and that's not good, but it's, there's 7.7 billion people on the planet,
It's I think a somewhat result of the fact that the only exposure that they have is not accurate. So I also think that it's like you can't get overly upset at them. Obviously, like, they're not supposed to be doing that, and it's bad that they're making assumptions, because I feel like you would make an assumption about someone that might be blind or deaf or whatever. But yeah, I think that that's something that I'm trying to work through, because I can get really angry. Because I think you should know better, or keep your comments to yourself. I don't walk around saying random things to people that I don't know. So I have gotten very, very angry, and it'll kind of ruin my whole day, because of that one person that said something that was just so offside, that I think I'm trying to work through going, they just didn't know, they shouldn't have done that, but it's not like it was coming from a mean, angry place. But I find the real anger comes from when I don't say anything, and then I'm angry at my own self for not correcting them, because if I don't, who will? Or they're going to do it again to someone else who may not be as outspoken as I am, or may not be as relatively tough as I am, like someone that's in a much more fragile place. That comment can do a lot more damage to them as it does for me for 5 hours, where I'm like, oh, this person's dumb or whatever. So then I go, why did I say something? So I think that I think that forgiveness and anger aspect of it is something that's very important, that we don't really talk about that much, I don't think.
Well, Nina had said, during that podcast that like when she writes her next book or when she puts together her next iceberg, she's going to put forgiveness in there with
Yeah.
obviously the alternative thing in the negative iceberg would be anger, right? You know, anger and forgiveness. And when I say forgiveness, I don't mean just turn the other cheek, you know, like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, and I found in my experience that a quick, and once again, going back to eye contact, is
Mhm.
looking them in the eye and saying, you know, and it was rare that I had to do that, but I would sometimes, right? Because most people don't react like that, right? Um, but some do occasionally. And once again, those are the ones that tend to stick in our memory all day, not the, 25 people we encountered that were totally cool, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't,
It's not one.
right? But, just firm eye contact and saying, look, I have a stutter. And then pausing afterwards. I have a stutter, looking them in the eye.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll take a second or two for it to rattle around their brain, but they'll almost always say, oh, okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. Right now they feel like, God, I was a jerk there.
And I go good because you're not going to do that to anyone else. Not only someone that sounds different, but someone that may look different or dress different or whatever, because you don't know. So just don't make comments. That's my own, if you don't know, I feel like if I make them feel like shit for like 10 minutes or half an hour, depending on how aggressive I am, I go good. Because they should watch what they say the next time to anyone.
Yeah.
So maybe they needed that little slap on the hand. Anyways, it was coming around their way eventually,
Right. And you're absolutely right. Like you are doing a favor, for the world of stuttering when you do that, because they're gonna be more aware of it the next time, right? That's gonna get their attention. Oh, I was just a jerk to somebody that has a speech impediment. That's not cool, right? And if they, and as I, said to Nina, now if they double down on their assholeness after, well, then they're just an asshole.
Yeah.
And ultimately, and I know this can be easier said than done, but of course we shouldn't let the worst 1 out of 1,000 people ruin our day, right? That's giving that jerk. I'll stop cursing now, but that jerk the power to ruin the rest of our day, and that's given them a lot of. That's letting them like set up camp in our mind, so to speak. And once again, I know it's easier said than done, but that's where the forgiveness comes in, right? Not that we're saying what they did is okay, but just look, some people are going to be jerks, and forgiveness is more for us. I mean, it's not for them that we forgive people, right? It's for us, right? Let it go. Okay, some people are going to be jerks. Most people, thank God, most people aren't like that. Thank God.
Yeah.
That kind of perspective. And this everything we're talking about sort of goes to the reframing, right? There are multiple ways to look at this. And stuttering, it seems to me, that 90% under the iceberg, which is the part that, anything in the world, 90% of it matters more than the 10%. So it's not the stuttering really that's the problem. It's the 90% that's below the surface. I mean, yes, the stuttering is, I'm not saying it's a non-issue, but if our iceberg is solid, then we're solid.
Totally. Absolutely.
Right. And I'm sorry, Christina, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and if for those, and everybody's got their own perspective on this, some people, for those that want to work, quote, on their stutter so that they can struggle less with their speech, I think the 90% of the iceberg below the surface needs to be melted or largely melted before any physical techniques to address the 10% above are going to work. Because so long as we're terrified of blocking and what other people think and of who we are when we're stuttering, that's way too much performance anxiety for any physical technique to work. It's almost like a great athlete or any athlete. If you step on the field or on the court and you're terrified of making a mistake, then I don't care how good your skills are when you're in your comfort zone, when you're practicing with nobody watching, with no cameras on you, etc., it's going to fall apart under pressure.
Absolutely.
Right? You know, we ought to learn to be fearless, I think. And when I say not fearless, like the fear is just eradicated, like we never even have fearful emotions. Those are, you know, we're always going to probably have our times where like, I don't really want to ask this question and stutter in front of these, 50 people, but if we make ourselves do it and we step out there anyway and do it every time, then the fear will reduce, our iceberg negativity will shrink, our power within ourself will increase, and eventually that leads to a lot of fearlessness. And if we can get to the point where we don't give a damn if we stutter, right? Not that we have to love it, not that we have to, all that, but where it doesn't freak us out anymore, and we know we can face blocks, and it's not the end of civilization. I think only then, or in most cases, I shouldn't say only because nothing's universal, but in the vast majority of cases, that's when, for those that want to do something about the actual volume that they're stuttering and the struggle, and it is physically tiring too. It can suck a lot of physical energy battling through syllables all day. There's a lot of breath holding, a lot of extra, I call it lifting weights with our face, with my face is how it felt like, get out of my mouth.
Totally.
Word. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially, if you think of a real iceberg in the ocean, right? If you melt that 90% of the iceberg below the surface, that 10% above the surface is going to have much harder time staying up, right? When the whole base of it is removed. And so, but as I told you before the podcast when we were chatting, this podcast is not focused on what many in the media talk about when they talk about stuttering, like whether it's a Joe Biden or a Bruce Willis or a, Samuel Jackson, like highlighting only people that have, quote, overcome their stutter, implying that, well, as long as you're still stuttering, well, then, you haven't gotten to where you should want to be, right? Yeah. Like the stuttering is the, is the problem. This podcast is really about that 90% that's below the surface.
Yeah, and I think that something that I definitely wanted to capture and to kind of mention to everyone that's listening is that I happen to be a very outgoing person generally. So if I had a stutter or not, I'm naturally a very kind of loud, outgoing person. So you can still accept your speech, how you sound, and not be as outgoing as I might be. But I think that allowing yourself to also understand that you can still accomplish a lot that doesn't involve speaking directly. Like, I'm not saying that you don't accept your speech unless you stand up in front of a million people and talk. Like that's not at all, I think, what I'm saying. And I have been asked that in the past. And I think an example that I generally say is that, for one, because I can't always sound the way that I want to sound, from a young kid, I used to write a lot. If it was in a diary or write articles or write things or write essays or stories or whatever, I would write, because it was the one time where I could sound on paper, sound the way that I wanted to actually sound when I spoke. And that was kind of like I think, indirect coping technique. I didn't even think of it at that time as a coping technique, but I just loved how I could just say exactly what I want to say, not change any words around. And
you're on equal playing field when you're right.
Yeah, as everyone else. And I think that because of doing that, as a kid and throughout years. Now, writing is one of my biggest strengths. It has nothing to do with talking at all, but the reason why I think I've done so well professionally and academically is because I write really, really well. And I get my academic things published in the government. I write a lot all day. So I think that my speech has allowed me to not only get better and more comfortable with talking, and that's like its own thing, but just using, if it wasn't, I don't think, if it wasn't for my speech, I wouldn't be as good of a writer as I am. And that has actually, I think, gotten me further than the fact that I can, like, if I speak fluently or didn't, I think that doesn't make me successful. I don't think in the future that's going to make me successful. It's the fact that I can write well that has only happened because of my speech. And I think a different example that I always give whenever I have this conversation is music. I always enjoy playing. I played violin for a long time, and I also kind of pictured that as like an extension of the sounds I can't get out of my mouth. I can get out through that, and I love playing an instrument, and I spent a lot of time doing that. So that's another example of something that you can excel at. That's not speaking directly, but it's when you restructure how you think about your speech, it kind of restructures how you think just about you as a person in general. And everyone that's listening, if you're not an outgoing person, don't want to talk, totally fine. Like, it's not that you need to do that, but there's a lot of jobs that you can get, a lot of things that you can accomplish that don't directly involve speaking, but I think that are powered through your personal acceptance of your speech.
That's a great point, and yeah, I totally agree with that. And I tend to, as you can tell, one of the things I'm doing is trying to encourage people to, if you want to say it, right? But if you're not, some people are not. Plenty of fluent people, for example, are not outgoing. That's
Exactly. Nothing to do with how you speak. Some people are just not very adventurous or not very outgoing, or I can be a bit crazy and loud, and I think that would stay the same or get even worse if I didn't sound the way that I sound. So yeah, there's people that can speak fluently all the time, and are a lot calmer than I am. So.
And that's a good point about that. It's almost like analogous to if somebody is deaf, then their eyes become, they can read lips, they can notice far more than you or I would notice, right, with their visual field, because they develop that part of themselves more. And I think I was talking last week with John Gomez, the director of When I Stutter, which is the episode that I'll release later today or tomorrow. And he talked about how in his experience, and he's not a person that stutters, but he's now directing his second movie on stuttering. So he's very interested in it. He's an SLP, so he works with kids in the schools in LA. And he said in his experience, a lot of people that stutter, because perhaps they're not as, out there, like, these weren't his words, they're mine now, but like life of the party, talk, chasing relationships, all that stuff, right? That they develop I think his exact words were a beautiful inner life. And that there's like a rich network that can develop inside of people that stutter that just doesn't develop as much in many people that don't deal with something like that, because they're more immersed in the world outside of themselves all the time, and therefore not going inward as much. Now that can lead to dark places, obviously, as we've talked about, with the negative side of the iceberg, but it can also lead to some really beautiful places where you become a better writer than you ever would have been otherwise, where you maybe become a better thinker than you would be otherwise. I don't know if you've heard of, and I should memorize her name so I don't just keep calling her the Portuguese politician, but she's a Portuguese member of parliament of African descent who has I won't call it a really bad stutter, a really good stutter going, really severe stutter. And she stands up in front of Parliament. There's a video on YouTube of it and says what she has to say. I mean, she's, very severe. And all these members of Parliament are just, sitting around her there. And they asked her about her stutter. One of the reporters asked her about it. And she said, look, yes, when I talk, I stutter, but when I think, it's very clear. Right? And
yeah.
And I think there's, I think we can potentially become better thinkers. Like I know, and this might sound weird, maybe I shouldn't say it publicly, but just by thinking, just by going wherever the tangents in my mind want to go, when I'm thinking, I really enjoy thinking a lot. I know that sounds weird, but.
No, what do I tell friends all the time, I'm like, I'm my own best company. I currently live on my own. I do a lot of backpacking on my own. And I think that I enjoyed how you said the inner something.
Beautiful inner life was what John Gomez.
Beautiful inner life. And I thought, I haven't ever heard that, but I feel like that is what I have. I enjoy thinking about things on my own. I spent a lot of time on. I am very comfortable with myself, and I think that, I think that is such a perfect way to describe it. I feel like I have a beautiful inner life that I honestly do think that I probably wouldn't have if I haven't had so much time to really think about things, especially during now where we're in lockdown. We're slowly going out of it, but I've been in lockdown for 70 plus days in my home, can't leave, can't do it. Anyways, you have a lot of time to think about things, and you're right. I enjoy just thinking or talking out loud or whatever. So you're not on your own at all.
Well, and on that note, as John Gomez mentioned, and he said the research is a little unclear, maybe controversial, but he believes, and I don't know what the ultimate truth is on this, but there is some research out there that says that people that stutter tend to be a little bit above average intelligence. And I doubt that that's just assuming it's true for the purposes of this conversation.
Let's do it. Why not?
Yeah. But assuming that's true, I would guess it's probably not just a genetic advantage, but it's probably that we spent less time yapping, more time reading, more time writing, right? And I know I used to read, and I will tell you that since I got more control of my speech a couple years ago, I don't read as much now. I don't. I'm writing some because I'm doing a voice to text, which is an easy way to write. But
yeah.
But I used to plow through biographies. Like I've read biographies of, I don't know, maybe 100, like dense 1,000-page biographies. I don't do that anymore. But I feel like it was a blessing that I did, because, and I don't think I would have, honestly. As you can tell, I'm pretty outgoing and all that. So I think I would have been out, going, talking more if I hadn't had the stutter. And it wasn't, and as I mentioned, after the age of 18, when I found my confidence, I would still say what I wanted, but, talking was still a chore. So I wasn't as small talk with this person, small talk with that person, sort of thing, just because it was a big chore, battling through syllables. So so my theory on that is that we probably are a little more intelligent on average than the typical person. And that's probably not because we were inherently like that, but because we didn't spend so much time listening to our self-talk, right? We spent time either listening or reading or writing, you know?
Yeah, no, and actually I was thinking just before this podcast, because we were kind of talking about childhood experiences, and I was thinking that I spent a lot of my time as a kid reading a lot, mostly because I didn't have friends because they picked on me, or the fact that I didn't want to talk, and I loved how fast I could read because I can't talk that fast. And I would read books about kings and queens and England and Scotland, and that's where I became so obsessed with the UK. That's why I did part of my undergrad is in English history. And as a young kid, probably 9, 10, I said, I'm going to go to university in a castle. And I was kind of thinking that if it wasn't for all of those experiences as a kid, I probably even wouldn't be in Edinburgh right now. It was because of me channeling that energy, not in my speech because I couldn't, but channeling that somewhere else has actually ended me up here. And so I think that overall, just thinking about kind of the positives of things that may not look like positives, but if you allow it, your speech can actually direct you or point you in a really interesting path that you might not really see it at that time. At that time, I thought I have no friends. All I'm doing is reading books and books and books. But looking back now, I think, wow, that was putting me on such an amazing path that I wouldn't even know was going to happen until 10, 20 years after. So yeah, there's positives, even if you can't see them right now.
The bottom line is you would not be who you are now if you hadn't had the stutter, right? I wouldn't be who I am. You know, and I mean, I would say I have a similar story, so not just with the reading thing. So I can almost guarantee you, because I thought it then, and looking back, I still think I would have done the same thing. If I hadn't had the stutter, I would not have become a dentist, because I would have figured coming out of college, yeah, I'll just, you know, talk my way up the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
You know, but I figured, look, there's a decent chance that if I just go the route that most of my friends are going, which is just graduate college, go into the business world, make your way as best you can.
Yeah.
I was like, at some point, I'm going to come up for a promotion, and it's going to be me and some other, you know, guy or gal that are up for the promotion, and I'm going to have the stutter, and they're not, and I don't want to give any supervisor, person doing the hiring, the opportunity to slow down my growth just because I got a stutter. So why don't I take control of the situation and go into something where I can be my own boss, where, you know, I can, I knew I could, you know, connect with people, you know, fine. So I'll be fine with my patients. Let me go into something where I will control my own destiny, essentially. And so I went into dentistry. And if I hadn't gone into dentistry, you know, obviously I wouldn't own 5 dental practices now. So I think there's a good chance if I hadn't had the stutter, you know, not just in other ways as far as, you know, the fact that I can, you know, tell you about George Washington and Stalin or whoever, you know, but you know, not just on that side of things, but just purely in a professional, successful sense, I think there's a good chance, you know, and obviously we can't run history twice. We can't live our life again and see what would have happened, but there's a good chance that it wouldn't have worked out as well. So I am happy that I had the stutter. And now that I'm kind of on this mission to get to know as many people with stutter as I can, and sort of spread the word on this, you know, through the stuttering organizations and all that, and through the podcast. And, you know, like, this is the most fun thing that I've ever encountered. There are other really fun things,
But
like
this is
with my
pretty
kids.
up there, though.
Yeah, it's way up there, and so I don't, like it's turned into a huge positive, even though I was utterly miserable, during high school and late middle school. I mean, so much so that my senior year of high school, and we'll go from the the positive to the other end of the spectrum here, but my senior year of high school, so there were only two people in the school that I was comfortable talking to or stuttering in front of. Everybody else I was trying to hide it from, and I was really severe, um, really severe in high school. Still pretty severe after, but real severe then. And so if I was going to talk, I was going to stutter. And so I just decided that I'm not going to give anybody any ammunition to make fun of me. I'm just going to shut myself up. Which, you haven't known me for long, but you can tell it's not my personality. And so my senior year of high school, neither of those two friends happened to be in my lunch period. So I had nobody to talk to during the lunch period. So rather than just find another table or, sit there in shame and eat alone, I chose to bring my lunch into the bathroom stall the entire lunch hour, my entire senior year of high school. So I was literally hiding in the bathroom, sitting there in the stall, smelling everybody's stuff as they came in, just living in dread, mortal dread that somebody would find out that I was this, what I thought a freak show hiding in the bathroom. And so, obviously I was completely miserable at that stage. And that was at the same time that my basketball career, if you want to call it that, it ended in high school, so it's not really a career, but my basketball playing, I still play basketball. Yeah. Not in front of people.
The height of the basketball career.
Yeah, that was my peak, if you will. From the standpoint of having fans in the stands. So at the same time I'm hiding in the bathroom in shame over my stutter, I came into my own as a basketball player. It was one of the better players. So it was this weird, yin and yang year. It was glorious from a sports standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
But then I would walk around. You know how basketball is. The fans were right on top of you, right? It's not like football or American football where wearing the mask and they can't see your face. Yeah. People knew who I was. People say, "Oh, good game," right? Just smile. Try to make as little eye contact at that point with people as possible, so you wouldn't have to talk, right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, So, but in retrospect, I'm glad I had those really tough times because I wouldn't be me if I hadn't had them. I wouldn't understand fully what other people that stutter are going through if I hadn't lived it. And so, I'm super happy that I was born with a stutter, essentially.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of best place I think to actually be. I think is when you don't wish that it wasn't there. And I think that I still have days where I'm I wish I didn't have it, and I have those days often. And I think moving forward, if I could choose to not have it moving forward at all, I would definitely probably wish to not have it tomorrow and it's done. But I think it would be naive of me, though, to think that I'm not where I am if I didn't have it. And then if you kind of apply that same theory moving forward, I kind of think, well, where would I not end up if I don't have it? If I did wake up tomorrow and it was totally gone. And I think even if you go for therapy, which I had, and honestly, I guess 10 months ago now, it was completely gone. I only have it now because I was in a car accident and I got some damage done to my face and stuff. Anyways, but I was completely fluent as of last March. And because of factors that were out of my control, it's kind of come back. But even when it was gone, it's not that it's gone. It's just that I've learned techniques to retrain muscles and patterns. It was still there and it was still kind of pop up at times. So even for people that have done therapy, it's still a part of you. It's not like a switch. And I think it's more the personality that you become when you have to experience something like this. I think that does make you a different person that is more compassionate, understanding, approachable, courageous, not only in speaking, but just in general. So I think that you're right. When you kind of go, if I even had to change it, or even if I learn techniques to help reduce it in times where you would want to, it doesn't mean that that's gone. And I think that it is a kind of part of me, the same way that if I colored my hair a different color, I would be a bit sad because it's just not who I am. So I think seeing it like that, I guess going back to the very beginning of the podcast, it's just one of the things that defines me. I think I'd be kind of sad to lose that part of me entirely. The same way that I wouldn't want to lose anything else.
That's how I feel also. And, you're totally right. There is no cure. The way I look at it is, as far as these struggling less, I'm not a big fan of the word fluency. I think that's kind of a dirty word, and at least in my stuttering mind, because for so long I was, thinking about, or at least, through those early years especially, I was thinking about fluency and, normalcy and all that. But anyway, but as far as struggling less with it, stuttering less, having to expend less energy battling through syllables. To me, the analogy is to staying in shape physically, right? There's no cure that we can do today or take today that guarantees that we'll be in shape, you know, a month from now or a year from now or 5 years from now, right? We have to do the work over time to stay in shape. That's the only way to stay in shape. And I think of our speech being exactly like that, right? There's no cure for this. Someone asked me the other day, I'm a fluent friend, when we were talking about this, and I agree with you. I don't talk too much about my stuttering because, people are interested, but they don't want to talk for 3 hours about it, usually.
Yeah.
But my friend asked me, so are you suppressing the stutter right now as we're talking? And I was like, I never thought about it in those terms, but yes, it's right below the surface. I am practicing my technique right now as we're talking. So it really is like staying in shape, just like, LeBron James or, pick your great athlete. Well, Michael Jordan, when he took 2 years off in his prime to go play baseball, right in the middle of his prime, and then he came back after not playing much basketball for 2 years. He was still really good because he's Michael Jordan, but he wasn't fully Michael Jordan, and so I see it really analogous to playing a sport, to keeping yourself sharp or to staying in shape. And yeah, definitely no cure. And I think can be a hope that holds people back in their life when they're just praying something's going to drop out of the sky, some cure is going to drop out of the sky, and that they'll just wake up tomorrow and it'll be gone. And I get the urge, like you said, if there were a cure and you could pop a pill and it'd be gone, you'd probably take the pill, right? I think almost everybody would, but that's not going to happen, or at least it's 1 in a 10 billion chance. So pinning our hopes on that is really wasted. Like it's a waste of our soul, I think, in some sense, right?
Energy. Put the energy into something more constructive.
Right.
Yeah. That I feel like this is definitely like a very like emotional topic that hits home, because I would wake up on my birthday every day and think that one of these days I would wake up on July 29th, and it would be gone. Because I didn't have the right info on people. I didn't have anyone to talk to, but I didn't understand what we know now. And I would wake up every day from like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, up till I was probably like older than I should have been. And waking up and saying something out loud, because I thought that one day it would I would go out of it, or it would just be gone. And I think that you are right. I think what a waste of energy and time that I could have put that into something else, or put that into my personal journey of accepting. That I think, like, if I could go back, like, man, I would. Why not just wake up and wish yourself a happy birthday? Why wish for some weird thing that won't ever happen? Yeah, it's quite depressing.
Well, it reminds me of the, and we'll wrap up here in a minute, but it reminds me of the Serenity Prayer, which I forget the exact words, but essentially it is, Lord, please give me the heck is it? Please give me essentially the wisdom to accept the things that I cannot change, the strength to work on the things that I can change, and I do want to change, and the wisdom to know the difference. And right, and we control, as people with stutter, we might not, fully control our stutter. I mean, by definition, we wouldn't be people that stutter if we fully controlled our stutter. But we control a lot. We have a lot of influence over our life, over all the really important aspects of our life. We have a lot of influence. And so, we only got so much time and energy. So let's put that into things that, will improve our quality of life, whether it's, backpacking South America by yourself, or, finally reading that, 1,000-page biography on why exactly Stalin was so evil, or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Live our life, right? Live our life. Not one of them, as far as I know. And when we're young, I mean, really any age, but especially when we're young, don't waste our youth obsessing and, obsessing over the fluency that we don't have, essentially.
Totally. And yeah, I think that's something that I have kind of, I had it written out on my books and on my mirror, was control the controllables. And I think that in my own life, not only with my speech, but just in general, because I am a very type A person, I'm an overachiever, the amount of time and effort I've put into trying to control things that are uncontrollable is not how you become successful, or not how you feel fulfilled. So I think that by channeling your energy into controlling the controllables, which may not be how you sound, you will live such a rich life where you do feel so fulfilled, and you don't feel as tired, because you are actually making a difference and impacting the parts of your life that you actually can control. You can control how hard you work, or who you spend your time with, or how to spend your own time, or what to do in that time, where you go, what you watch, who you see, what you think about. So I think that, I think my last words of advice would definitely be to focus on controlling the controllables.
Those are fantastic last words, and it was great talking to you, Christina. I'd like to keep talking to you for 3.5 hours, but nobody's going to watch the podcast if they see a 3.5 hour podcast. So only Joe Rogan can do that. But
yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed doing this stuff a whole bunch, and I hope that there's something that we have said that will help someone, or make someone think about things like a bit differently. And yeah, just thank you for doing this podcast and for asking me to come on. So thank you so
No,
much.
it's been my pleasure. I very much appreciate you coming on. You're you're a great guest, and you got a good story, and I think it will benefit some people to have heard what you have to say. So thank you, and
Great.
I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.